Hello, I am Kathy Hall. I'm the Executive Director of the Nebraska Statewide Independent Living Council. And first of all, I want to thank you for all of you for coming today and participating in our first Disability Employment Awareness event. First, I would like to thank all the organizations that were involved in planning this, and that includes the League of Human Dignity, Independence Rising, Shields, Nebraska, Madonna School and Community-Based Services, APSE, Nebraska VR, Adapt Nebraska, Integrative Transitions, Nebraska Family Support Network, the Nebraska Statewide Independent Living Council, Disability Rights in Nebraska, the University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities, and Munroe-Meyer Institute, Nebraska Council on Developmental Disabilities, People First in Nebraska, the ARC in Nebraska, Harper's Self-Directed Services, Brain Injury Alliance of Nebraska. I have just a few housekeeping rules I would like to go through. Dropbox. And Melanie is going to put that in the chat for you. There is a list of keystrokes for Zoom available in the Dropbox. And this is beneficial for people who have some issues with mousing or are visually impaired. We are asking if you're not using a sign language or presenter, you turn off your video and your microphone because it gets too busy with all these little squares of people. So, yeah, of course, if you need the interpreters, turn it on. All of the sessions will be closed caption. To turn on the caption, you click on the little arrow that's beside the CC and enable subtitles. Just a reminder that later in this week, we will be having a panel including the director and some of the actors from the film Heart of Glass. So I'm going to ask Melanie to put the link for the film into the chat also. All sessions will be recorded. And if you don't want to be identified, you can rename yourself. This is done by hovering over your square until 3 dots show. Click on them, then select rename and from the drop-down menu and enter a new one. And that could be anything like anonymous or whatever you want to call yourself. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mary Angus. She will be your moderator for today. Mary?
As the moderator, I would also like to let you all know how excited we are to have so many people here today. I believe we've got over 60 people in attendance, and we're going to start off the Monday with Brigid. And Brigid Griffin is with the transition program at VR and has a really good insight into what goes on from their perspective. And I will let you take it away. I will set your PowerPoint up.
Thanks, Mary. Hi, everyone. I'm so delighted to see you all here today to mark National Disability Employment Awareness Month, which is fast coming to a close at this point. We're almost at the end of October, which is almost hard to believe, except for the snow that's on the ground in Northeast Nebraska this morning. I am here today to talk about students with disabilities and affording them the opportunity to be exposed to and to explore options for employment through pre-employment transition services. As Mary said, my name is Brigid Griffin, and I am Program Director for Transition with Nebraska VR. Next slide, please, Mary. So whenever I talk about pre-employment transition services, I always like to refer back to the mission statement for Nebraska VR because it helps to kind of focus our discussion. We help individuals with disabilities prepare for, obtain, and maintain employment while helping businesses, our other partner, recruit, train, and retain employees with disabilities. In pre-employment transition services, which is where I'll be focusing my attention today, we concentrate heavily on the part about preparing for employment. So we're really working with students in order to help them think about employment and prepare for employment. Next slide, please, Mary. So first of all, let me give you a little overview of Nebraska VR services. So you'll see I have two columns on this slide here. The first one talks about pre-employment transition services, which are an early start for students exploring the world of work and opportunities to engage in competitive and integrated employment. So really, when we talk about pre-employment transition services, we're talking a lot about exposure and exposing students to those opportunities. Nebraska VR services come a little bit further down the line. Those are more individualized services for anyone with a disability, and those are directed at developing an individualized plan for employment. So you can see the little difference there from those very early exposure pieces to really getting down to the nitty-gritty of getting a plan written in order to put services in place to achieve an employment goal. Next slide, please, Mary. When we talk about transition, we talk about lots of partners working together. We're working with Nebraska VR, of course, because that's what I'm here to talk about, but also the local school district, the ESU, and we also reach out to other partners that we have, like developmental disability services and lots of other services in the community. We have agreements at both the state and the local level that support us working together. We work with the special education department at the state level with Department of Education, and also with the career and technical education services at the Department of Education as well. You can move on, Mary. So what are we asked to do by the law? So the Rehabilitation Act, as amended by the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which you all probably know better as WIOA, charges us with providing or arranging for the provision of pre-employment transition services for all students with disabilities who are eligible or potentially eligible for services as they transition out of school into post-secondary education or the world of work. We've got a list there on this slide of the pre-employment transition services that complement the services that are offered by the school. So we work together with the schools to provide these services for students. So we have exposure to the world of work, providing exploration and assessment services like job exploration inventories, matching student values with the world of work, looking at learning styles and helping students to understand their learning styles. We do career development, skill development, connecting with community resources, which is really important. And of course, our final consideration for all of us is that students will have employment outcomes. Next slide, please, Mary. When we speak of transition services, VR acts as a bridge between school and adulthood. And that's exactly how I think of us. I think of us with one foot in the schools and one foot in adult services. And we're that bridge to help students to transition smoothly from school to post-school settings, whether that's post-secondary training or employment and competitive integrated employment. You'll all probably think a little bit about order of selection, which has had VR having a wait list for the past few years. We're quickly working on that wait list, and we're hoping to have the priority one part of that wait list cleared by December of this year, which will help for an even smoother transition as we move forward. Next slide, please, Mary. So let's talk about who is a student with a disability. So a student with a disability is defined very clearly in the law. It's somebody between the ages of 14 and 21, a person in an educational program, and that can include non-traditional programs, alternative programs, homeschool programs, post-secondary programs, and juvenile justice programs. It includes students who are working on a GED or any type of short-term training program where they'll be earning a recognized credential. It includes students who are receiving special education services or any individual who is eligible for the purposes of 504. So we say that because we know that all students in the schools with disabilities do not have an IEP or a 504 plan, but they may still be a student with a disability. And our services in pre-employment transition services are available to all students with disabilities. Those students are considered potentially eligible for Nebraska VR services. So there's a different eligibility process for students accessing pre-employment transition services and the later step of making an application and becoming eligible for VR services. That's kind of a higher bar of eligibility. Next slide, please, Mary. And what are pre-employment transition services? So there are 5 core services that we provide to students: job exploration counseling, instruction in self-advocacy, counseling on post-secondary training options that are available to students, workplace readiness, and work-based learning. Next slide, please, Mary. What does that really mean? I mean, those are kind of the words that are in the law, but how does that break down and what does that really mean for providing services to students? Well, we work with students on identifying strengths, abilities, and capabilities for work and adult living. We help them work on setting goals or thinking about setting goals and even the process of how to set goals for work and adult living. We talk about learning habits and attitudes and behaviors that will enhance participation in work. We help students to engage in job exploration activities and community work experiences. Of course, right now, engaging in community work experiences is not really possible because of the pandemic, but we do hope to get back to those services sooner rather than later, as soon as it's safe to do so. And we also work with students on exploring post-secondary training options. Next slide, please, Mary. Here's a list of examples of some of the things that we can do specifically in pre-employment transition services. And I'm not going to read through all of these for you because you can quickly look at them, but I am going to highlight a couple of things in here as it relates to this particular presentation and my co-presenters. So some of the things that we really have to think about for students who are receiving any kind of benefit like Social Security benefits is thinking about how those benefits will affect planning for employment. And we work with partner agencies like Easter Seals and Goodwill of Nebraska and Region 5 in order to help students take those things into consideration and know how their benefits and work interact when they leave high school. So Shauna will be here later to talk about that. And assistive technology, we also know, is a really important part of success for students when they leave school. And so Tobias will be here to talk about and address the assistive technology partnership with VR and particularly with in conjunction with pre-employment transition services. You can see there are lots of other service examples there. Next slide, please, Mary. All right, in our work with schools, we do have a transition services partnership planner, which is a guide for educators in arranging for Nebraska VR services for students with disabilities. This transition services planner, next slide, Mary, please, talks about our partnership and collaboration with the schools. It talks about roles and responsibilities, the referral process for VR, how we can exchange information for the good of students. We also have a transition partnership planning form, which we complete every year with each and every high school in Nebraska. If you go to the next slide, Mary, you can see what that partnership planning agreement looks like. We complete this, and we still complete it this year, although we are working in a virtual environment, with every school district with a goal date of September 30th. This is to promote a coordinated effort between the school district, the educational service unit, and Nebraska VR in providing services for students. It helps to recognize that every school is different, and that's why we kind of break this down and say, how are things going to work in your particular school? We can reassess this agreement as the year goes on, and we annually kind of do a survey with the schools to see how Nebraska VR services are being implemented and how well they're working with students. Next slide, please, Mary. We do have a pre-employment transition service coordinator assigned to every high school in the state. So we've got really big high schools where we might have more dedicated counselors who spend lots of time in schools because of the amount of students in a particular school. And then in our smaller school districts, we might have a counselor that goes to several different schools or districts. In fact, that even happens in the urban areas too. A counselor rarely would only be assigned to one school. Even if it's a large high school, they'll usually have at least a couple of schools assigned to them. We have a contact list on our external website. So if anybody wants to know who is the counselor for any school in the state, you can go to our external website and find that by entering the name of the school. We also have business account managers who help us to provide outreach to businesses. You'll remember early on I talked about our other partner being businesses. But those business account managers reach out to businesses and help us to promote work-based learning opportunities for students and connect us with those businesses to provide those opportunities. Next slide, please, Mary. So what's the referral process for Nebraska VR? We do have a referral form. We do not require a social security number for students, which is often a question that we're asked. But you submit a VR referral form, usually through the school. If a student is homeschooled, though, a parent can call and make a referral themselves as well for a student. But that referral form comes to the VR counselor attached to the school district or that local area. And VR contact will be made within 10 days and an appointment will be scheduled for an orientation to VR services. On our website, we also have a little video clip that is an orientation to pre-employment transition services also, if parents would like to view that before making a referral. Once the referral is made and a discussion of those services has been had, you can complete a pre-employment transition services consent and release of information form. If you go to the next slide, Mary, you'll see what that form looks like. It's a one-page form, and this form gathers the data that's required to be reported for pre-employment transition services. So it's not a terribly long form, but it does have several pieces that have to be filled in, and that's related to data that the federal government collects in relation to pre-employment transition services. It also allows us to consult with the school, get records from the school, and share information with the school about services that are being provided to students. Next slide, please, Mary. So things that happen under the pre-employment transition services umbrella with Nebraska VR. So one thing that has happened quite a lot is summer transition programs. We've been conducting summer transition programs for several years, although we did not do it in the summer of 2020. The Nebraska Department of Education did have some summer transition programs virtually during 2020, but this was much reduced because of the COVID pandemic. I think there'll be a lot of partners in the audience today that would be glad to hear that we are planning to have summer transition programs next summer, and we're planning to release the RFP on December 1st. So look out for that, and if you have any questions, you can let me know. We also work in partnership with 5 ESUs across the state to provide youth transition conferences, which now have a focus on being a job fair or a job expo that will expose students to employers in their community and to pre-employment transition activities. We also work in conjunction with NDE to provide a Nebraska Youth Leadership Council, which is the NYLC. That's a group of young people across the state who are leaders in the disability world. They are meeting virtually right now too, and if you have any need to find out more about that program, you can do so on our website, or you can contact me directly as well, and I'll point you in the right direction. We are working in conjunction with PTI Nebraska to provide family employment awareness training, and that's that FEAT acronym that's right there. Again, happening virtually right now, but we hope to get back to in-person meetings in the spring if that's possible. We provide lots and lots of work-based learning experiences in the community for students where they have paid work experience with employers in the community arranged by Nebraska VR. We know that it's really important to connect students to employment opportunities in order for them to really have an opportunity to learn about employment. So that's a high priority for us. And then we're also involved with Project Search. Project Search is a 9-month, fully immersive employment program for students with complex disabilities that takes place entirely at a business site during the student's last year of high school eligibility. We currently have 14 sites in the state, and 13 of them are in person at this time. So I think that's quite amazing that we have 13 that are able to be in person during this time. It's a little bit different this year to normal, but at the same time, we have students who are learning on the job at 13 sites. The other site is based in an elderly community, and so for the safety of that population, the site is not in person at this time. Last slide for me. This is my favorite slide of all my presentations. And I think the reason for this is the meaning behind our work. So why are meaningful and coordinated transition services important? There's a lot of research out there to show that work experience during high school is the strongest predictor for adult employment for people with disabilities. So that's quite an amazing thing when you think about it. We know that making those connections in high school is really, really important. And creating and maintaining high expectations regarding work leads to job and careers. So just the fact of having that in place is really important. I am keeping an eye on my time here. I know we're right at 1:30, so I'm going to stop right there and see if there are any questions for me before I pass it along to Shauna.
If you have a question and would like to put it in the chat box, that would be perfect, and I can read it for Brigid.
I know you're all probably anxious to get along with the rest of the presentations today as well, and I don't want to take up too much time either. Mary, if you scroll along the next couple of slides, my information is on the very last slide. So if anybody has any questions that they would prefer to pose to me in an email or anything like that, feel free to email me and I'll be happy to get back to you. And I'd really like to say thank you very much for the opportunity to present today on pre-employment transition services with Nebraska VR. And I am going to lead into Shauna Dahlgren, who is with Easter Seals, Nebraska, and Shauna is going to talk about benefits. Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you, Brigid, for that introduction. And I believe Mary is going to share some slides for me as well. But as Brigid said, my name is Shauna Dahlgren. I'm with Easter Seals, Nebraska, and I am a work incentive and community outreach specialist here at Easter Seals, Nebraska. And so, as Brigid mentioned, there are some collaborative efforts between VR and some community partners related to benefits counseling services. So I am going to talk about that, but first, I sort of want to take a step back just for a second. Mary, if you go to the second slide there, once you get the slideshow going, and talk about individuals, students and young adults that may not yet be eligible for Social Security disability or SSI benefits. And so I just want to talk a little bit about some application assistance services that are available through Easter Seals, Nebraska, through the Bridge program. And I believe in the Dropbox, there should be a brochure for Bridge services, which sort of spells out what that means and who can be eligible for that. But essentially, these are services for transition age youth and young adults who are age 14 to 21, residents of Douglas and or Sarpy counties that have developmental or intellectual disabilities, including autism spectrum. And that actually can be broadened quite a bit more than that as well. This is a partnership that we have through United Way to provide these types of services for individuals and their caregivers or their family members who would like some assistance applying for SSI or other programs like DD waiver services or Medicaid or things like that. I did include Sean Newell's contact number. I did not include her email, but I could include that in the chat if anybody's interested. And she would be the primary contact for services for this program. So for those individuals who, as I said, are not yet eligible for Social Security or SSI benefits, maybe not yet eligible for DD waiver services or those kinds of things, this is assistance that is available to help them with those application processes and some of those, navigating some of those systems. And part of the significance of that, I guess, is for Social Security purposes, individuals are considered 18 or are considered adults at age 18. So when you're a student or a child under the age of 18, there may be a number of reasons that you're not eligible. Maybe you're medically eligible, but not financially eligible for SSI, Medicaid, those kinds of things. But that can change at the age of 18. So there is some things to be aware of, some things to prepare for. If an individual is eligible as a child, they need to prepare for applying as an adult at 18. And if they're not eligible as a child, they may want to go ahead and apply at age 18 as an adult for some of those benefits. And as Brigid kind of pointed out, there's some differences once somebody sort of exits or graduates from high school or a transition program. There's some changes to VR services. The waiver sort of starts to come into play. So there's just some assistance or guidance that can be provided that can be really helpful for individuals and their families.
Excuse me, Shauna.
Yes.
Graciela has asked, is this assistance provided in Spanish as well?
Yes. In fact, many of the forms for the Bridge program are already translated into Spanish. Sometimes Sean does use interpreters, depending on the situation. Sometimes there's a family member that acts as an interpreter, but if interpreter services are needed, we do have access to those. That's a great question. Thanks, Graciela. Okay, so if you go to the next slide then, Mary, once individuals are eligible for Social Security disability or SSI benefits, as Brigid said, that's one of the primary concerns a lot of times when people are thinking about work, when it's the individuals themselves or their family members that may have concerns about the effect of employment on the benefits that they now receive. And so there are a number of maybe misconceptions or myths out there. People sometimes think that if they go to work, they're going to lose the benefits that they receive, or if for some reason those benefits stop, then they'll never be able to get them back. There's a lot of justified concerns in there. And so what Brigid talked about was benefits counseling services, and that's sort of an umbrella term that we use. Brigid's slide, and you'll see in my slides later that we use some more specific terms for a particular type of service. But benefits counseling is kind of an overall description of services that are available to individuals and really address the effects that work in other life situations and changes in those life situations can have on disability benefit programs. And the services include and address really any benefits that the individual receives. So it could be Social Security or SSI, it could be Medicaid, it could be developmental disability services or other waiver services. Really any federal, state, and local benefits that an individual receives is addressed in those benefits counseling services. And so you might ask, you can go a couple slides ahead there, Mary.
Okay.
There you go. And so you might ask, why are these services important? Or you may think that when you have some information about the benefits that you receive, that you really have all of the information that you need to know about the implications of work. You may get information directly from Social Security, or you may get information directly from Health and Human Services. But probably maybe anybody that's participating today, but certainly anybody that has been involved in providing benefits counseling services can tell you that you may have some information, but you may not necessarily have all of the information that you need to truly make informed choices or informed decisions about work. And that's really what we're all about. We're not about telling you what decisions you should or should not make or what you should or should not do. We're just about making sure you have complete and thorough information about the implications on the cash and associated medical benefits that you receive to make informed decisions for yourselves. Because those cash and medical insurance benefits can be really valuable resources as you transition into the workforce. And it's really all about early intervention and education. So the sooner you know about the work incentives, about the implications on the benefits that you receive, it can really help prevent future problems. That doesn't necessarily mean that you'll never have any problems. Again, that's sort of another given sometimes, is that you can do everything that you're supposed to do. You can report everything that you're supposed to report. And sometimes there are still issues, even though you did everything to the best of your ability and did everything that you were supposed to do. But hopefully, knowing about this information ahead of time, being prepared for what should or should not change, will help prevent things like overpayments or underpayments, or making crisis decisions based on inaccurate information, or making creating, problems that could be avoided if you would have had that information ahead of time. So that's kind of overall what benefits counseling is and why it's important. And so if you go to the next slide, there's another slide about Bridge that will, again, just be a reminder. I've sort of already outlined who is eligible for Bridge, but just as a reminder, it's the group that's age 14 to 21 in Douglas or Sarpy counties and experience certain types of disabilities. But in addition to the application services, I guess I just wanted you to know that, again, this group of individuals who participate in the Bridge program is also eligible for these benefits counseling services. And I'll get into a little bit more about what that means. But if you go to the next slide after Bridge, it talks about the Work Incentives Planning and Assistance Project. And this is another program through Easter Seals, Nebraska, that sort of can capture the individuals who maybe are not eligible for the Bridge program. So if you remember, there's some specific eligibility criteria as far as location to be eligible for Bridge services. And that's not something that Easter Seals determined. That was determined by the funder through United Way. So WIPA is kind of our way to provide similar services other than the application services to individuals who are age 14 to 21 and maybe don't live in Douglas or Sarpy counties. So for this program, individuals have to be at least age 14, but not yet full retirement age, eligible for or receiving Social Security, Disability, or SSI benefits, and working or actively seeking work is the priority. But you could also be just considering work in order to be eligible for services through that program. And I did include Raina Gulbranson's contact information, on this slide for the WIPA program, we call it for short. And she can be contacted directly with questions, or if you're interested in services, you could also contact the Ticket to Work helpline and they can make a direct referral to that WIPA program. And the phone number for the Ticket to Work helpline is also included in the slide. I will go ahead and say that one out loud. It's 81866-968-7842. And that is a way that you can get connected to WIPA services as well. Or as I mentioned, you could contact Raina directly. And then if you go to the next slide, this is a slide that kind of describes the services that are available through both the Bridge and WIPA programs. And again, it refers to that benefits counseling service, sort of an overall description. We talked a little bit about things that people think or things that people have heard about their benefits that they receive and what will happen if they work. And the important thing to understand is that everybody's situation is different. So even though you may think you receive the same services or the same benefits, or your situation is exactly the same as somebody else's, it's not necessarily a good idea to base your employment decisions on what has happened with somebody else or information that somebody else has been given about their situation, because it truly is an individualized situation, and there sometimes are variables that are different that you may not even realize are different between the two situations. So benefits counseling services really is a comprehensive and individualized analysis of the impact of employment on Social Security cash benefits and other public benefits for a specific individual. We provide work incentives education and management. We provide practical tools and guidance on reporting income to Social Security and other administrative agencies, so that you're aware of exactly what your responsibilities are, when you need to report, your options for reporting, all of those kinds of things. Because reporting that information is really one of the keys to ensuring the least negative implications of, I guess, of not reporting that information. So that's really important. And then there is follow-up support as progress is made towards your employment goal. And again, this is really important and can be really helpful during any transition, really, whether it be from school to work or from one workplace to another, changes in age, changes in living situation. And during any of those transitions, it can be really important and helpful to have somebody that you can contact and find out exactly what the implications are at any given point in time. Okay, all right. So if you go to then the next slide, this talks about a little bit more specifically about the collaborative efforts that Brigid was mentioning earlier. So with Nebraska VR, as Brigid mentioned, they do pre-employment transition services, and then they work with adult cases, depending on the situation. And that IPE assigned and some of those additional services can be provided. This is sort of just a general list of the different services that are available. Again, as Brigid mentioned, Easter Seals Nebraska is just one of the vendors or service providers that provide these types of services. But just knowing that they're available, this allows you to just be aware of that and maybe check with the VR counselor that you're working with for any services that might be relevant and who the provider options are. But I'll just mention the terms so that you hopefully are familiar with those as far as benefits assessment, benefits planning, and benefits management. And that's in addition to the benefits orientation that Brigid mentioned. These are sort of follow-up services to that, right? So the benefits orientation is kind of that initial key piece when you're working with vocational rehabilitation or Nebraska VR. And then the assessment and planning and management are some of those sort of transition services that are available after that service is provided. And so these, again, sort of tie into that pre-employment transition service and then those adult services that Brigid mentioned. And part of that employment discussion, again, is just moving on with anything else that might be helpful and relevant, such as the accommodations and some of those kinds of things when you're thinking about school or when you're thinking about work. And so that last slide, as Mary had up there, is really just a list of a couple of resources that are available to help sort of provide additional information to what I've already mentioned. Two of them are on the Social Security website. One, the Red Book, is really that sort of initial publication or initial guide that Social Security provides that outlines the different types of benefits that are available and generally the work incentives that are available to individuals. And that's just one of the tools we use as far as providing education and information to individuals that we're serving and providing services for. I did not include my contact information in these slides because I did include the contact information specific to the programs that I've talked about. But I would be, again, happy to provide my contact information in the chat if anybody does have some general questions or anything like that. But contacting those individuals, either Sean Newell for the Bridge program or Raina Gulbranson for the WIPA program, would be very good resources as well. And so hopefully that gives you enough information to kind of describe the services that are available, how we might be helpful during that process, or how somebody who provides benefits counseling services can be helpful during that process with Nebraska VR. And for either of the programs that I've mentioned, I should probably say that we don't need a direct referral. Nebraska VR does refer to us for those programs, but you don't have to have a direct referral to the program to receive services. Anybody can contact and ask questions or ask for services through either one of those programs. So essentially you can self-refer, or if you have questions about a loved one or something like that, you're welcome to call with questions. So with that, I guess I will open it to see if there are any additional questions. Or if not, I will pass it along to my co-presenter, another co-presenter, Tobias, to talk about assistive technology.
There are no questions in the chat box. Other than to say, Melanie says to go along with the Dropbox, as well as there's great information, and the film Hearts of Glass. Definitely go check that one out for a later presentation this week.
All right, thank you. If there's no questions, Tobias, I think you're up.
All right, thank you, Shauna. So my name is Tobias. I am with the Assistive Technology Partnership, also known as ATP. We are part of Nebraska VR, which is part of the Department of Education. So we are a state agency. We try to be your one-stop shop for assistive technology. We serve everyone throughout the lifespan, and we serve every disability. But today I'm going to focus more on the transition age services that ATP provides. And specifically, we're going to talk about what is a reasonable accommodation and how do I get it. So let me share my screen. All right, so reasonable accommodations in the workplace. What is a reasonable accommodation? So here's a very legalese type definition. Reasonable accommodation is any change to the application or hiring process to the job, to the way the job is done, or the work environment that allows a person with a disability who is qualified for the job to perform the essential functions of that job and enjoy equal employment opportunities. Accommodations are considered reasonable if they do not create an undue hardship or direct threat. That's a mouthful. To simplify that, really an accommodation is anything that helps an individual with a disability overcome some limitation so that they can perform their job. And we'll go into more detail on what makes it reasonable or not reasonable. So with some examples. So what is an accommodation? So of course there's assistive technology. That's what we do. That could be anything from, oops, I didn't mean to push that, screen readers or text-to-speech software such as Drag and Dictate, something as simple as a modified pencil grip, apps for your phone like scheduling software, could be an ergonomic keyboard, an ergonomic mouse, adjustable desk or office chair. So the types of assistive technology that are out there are limitless. So it is out there. Other types of accommodations would be modifying existing equipment. Example of this would be if the position was at a factory or an assembly line, if the company moved or relocated a button or a switch to accommodate for an individual's disability, that would be an example of modifying existing equipment. You also have restructuring of job duties. So what this is basically is taking a job duty from one individual and giving it to another And this, an example of this would be, let's say you got a position and you have a back injury, and a very small portion of that position requires heavy lifting. An employer may be willing to pass that duty off to someone else to accommodate your back injury. Another example will be a modified work schedule. So let's say someone has diabetes and has issues keeping their blood sugar up. So they might be given, instead of one 15-minute break in 4 hours, they might be given 2 or 3 5-minute breaks just to allow them to have some orange juice or take some insulin or whatever it may be to keep their blood levels at the appropriate place. Training and hiring materials in different formats. This could be getting the materials in enlarged font. It could even be having somebody read them or having them read to you. And lastly, modifying facilities. This could be anything from lowering your desk to raising your desk to widening a doorway, rearranging furniture. It's any change to the facility itself to accommodate for a disability. So, undue hardship. Undue hardship is an action requiring significant difficulty or expense. It's not the same for every company. So things that take into consideration would be the size of the company, number of employees, financial resources. So basically, if you're looking at Amazon compared to a mom and pop cafe, Amazon has a lot more resources and has a lot greater ability to provide, let's say, a more expensive accommodation than someone who owns a small business locally. So how do we request an accommodation? First thing you got to do, you have to disclose your disability to the supervisor or human resources. They can't give you an accommodation if they don't know about the disability. This information is confidential and remains between you and the supervisor or HR. Coworkers may notice or may be told if the accommodation affects them or their job duties, but they will not be given the reason why, because that is confidential information. Step 2, have a conversation about how your disability affects your work. Here's an example. Because of being diabetic, my insulin levels fluctuate and cause me to become extremely fatigued, making it difficult to concentrate on tasks. You're the expert on your disability, and not every disability is the same person to person. So it really is up to you to let your supervisor know how your disability affects you so that they can best help you come up with a solution to the problem. So have a conversation about what's worked in the past. Now, for the transition age individuals or the younger people, you most likely had an IEP in high school, individualized education plan. In that were most likely accommodations that the school was giving you. Now, I highly suggest you know what accommodations you were getting. That way, when you get into the world of work, you can ask for those same accommodations if they work for you. So you know your disability better than anyone else, but the supervisor knows more about the business itself. And that's why we're having this two-way conversation. You can tell them how the disability affects your work, and then they can help problem solve and figure out what accommodations might best work for you. This is a very important part of the process. You have to have this conversation. You can't just go up and say, I have a disability and this is what I need, nor can a supervisor or a company just say, oh, you have this disability, so this is what we're giving you. It's very personalized and it's different for every individual. Okay, hold on. Sorry about that. All right, step 4, implement the accommodation. In the end, the supervisor does have the final say, but if an accommodation is denied, there needs to be a reason. And biggest thing, make sure the accommodation works for you. Don't be afraid to say if it doesn't work. A solution may work for one person, but not the next. So if the company says, here's your accommodation, don't be afraid to say, this isn't working for me. And another thing to keep in mind is that over time, things change. Just because an accommodation works today doesn't mean it's going to work 5 years from now. And so this is an ongoing conversation with you and your supervisor to make sure that you are receiving accommodations that help you be successful at work. So here's some resources. Of course, Assistive Technology Partnership, Nebraska VR, If you're working with Nebraska VR and you think assistive technology might benefit you, ask your VR counselor to do a referral over to ATP. For pre-employment transition services, we come over, we do a consultation, we give you equipment to try, make recommendations. For adult clients, it's about the same process. ATP also will help with financial or help you find finances to pay for assistive technology if it's something that you need to purchase or if the employer is unwilling or unable to. ATforall.com is a website that ATP runs or hosts. Basically, it's like a Craigslist or an online library of AT. Almost all of it is at no cost. Our services are always free because we're the state, but it's a list of assistive technology that you can loan, we can loan to you or even demonstrate to you. So go to atforall.com. You can search by office for different parts of the state. You can search by types of AT, and that's a good way to get things to try out to make sure if it works for you on the job or not before you purchasing it or your employer purchasing it for you. Also, we have the ADATA.org, a good place to find different citations from the ADA guidance, and then the Job Accommodation Network, askjan.org. And there's my contact information. If there's any questions, feel free to reach out to me and I'll do my best to answer.
Hey, Tobias, we've got one from Sharon. If
All
I
right.
have multiple disabilities, do I have to reveal all of them if I'm only requesting accommodations for one?
Okay, Sharon. So no. So what you disclose to the employer is up to you. So there's nothing that you have to disclose all of your disabilities. But yes, if there is a disability that you do need an accommodation for, that's the one you want to disclose.
On a related question, do you have any advice on disclosing the disability during or after the job interview?
Oh, that's a good question. And I knew that was going to come up. You don't have to disclose it during the interview if you don't feel comfortable. But there's nothing stopping you from doing it. So really it's up to you. Personally, wow, I don't know if I can answer that. It could go either way. It really just depends on the job and the disability and the accommodation. So yeah, I can't give you a definitive answer on that one.
And finally, do you have any resources for assistive technology for people working in the agricultural field?
For the agricultural, well, first I'd say try atforall.com. We have a variety of stuff on there. For people that are in the agricultural industry, if you're working with Nebraska VR, they have connections to a program called Agribility, and they can do a referral there if it's a farm-related job goal. As far as a specific agriculture-related AT, I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Would the Job Accommodation Network maybe have some answers to that?
They very well may. That's a good point, Mary. Yes, try them first.
Bias.
Do you provide any type of Bluetooth device that connects to hearing aids or the implants, Clara implants?
So on AT4All, we do have a handful of different listening devices for individuals with difficulty with hearing. Whether we have a Bluetooth one to loan out, I do not know, but we'd be happy to look into that for you and discuss it. So I would say first go to atforall.com and look at what we have. And if there's not something there that can solve your issue, please feel free to reach out to us at our 800 number. Or shoot me an email and I'll do some research for you and connect you to somebody that can help more than I can.
Rich put the link to Agribility in the chat box. Shauna wants to clarify that these Brazil services are available to individuals with any disability. Although Brigid has some specific considerations, all of our other services and programs are available regardless. Mindy says, and she asked about the agricultural, it has been hard to find things specific to agricultural. Michelle says if you request an accommodation and there are maybe 3 different versions of AT you are asking for, or can a company choose which one you get?
Okay, so yes, the final decision for the accommodation is up to the company. So the key really is does that piece of equipment accommodate you, or does it work for you? So the company can choose which one they're going to purchase, but the big thing is to have that conversation to make sure that it works for you.
Okay. Kayla wants to say, Adriana, I typically tell my clients to weigh out the job and the job requirements. If the job will require an accommodation right away, then I have to disclose right away. However, if it's something that isn't going to affect the job in the beginning, I encourage them to wait until they are comfortable disclosing to the employer. Sometimes they're able to work for a while before needing an accommodation.
Kayla, I think that's excellent advice. Thank you.
Melanie put the Job Accommodation Network in, and that looks like that's about it for right now. Are there any other questions to put in the chat box?
All right, well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak today, so thank you very much.
That's been wonderful. Thank you so much, all 3 of you. And I really appreciate your participation. And I apologize for the slideshow problems with Shauna. That was because I was using 2 screens. If everybody would like to join us again tomorrow at 1 o'clock, Kathy can tell you a little bit about what we're going to do then, and I'm putting her on the spot. Thank you, everybody.
You are, actually. First of all, I want to thank everybody for being here today. Anyway, so tomorrow we are going to be talking about self-employment and adult services through VR. And then we're also going to be talking about the ticket to work.